And she is, well, we are having a conversation about gender equity, we're talking about abuse, we're talking about advocacy. And advocacy is a really important role that you are taking part in now. How did you get involved in the role of becoming an advocate for people who come from abusive situations or cohesive situations? Tania?
So I basically became involved. Firstly, I was going to 2 different therapies. One was a paid therapy and one was an unpaid therapy. And when I went to the unpaid therapy, they announced that they were having advocacy. To be part of an advocacy, you can't have therapy within that organisation. So I was at the point where I was strong enough to do what I do now. So I basically put my name down. I went through a bit of training, media training, and doing my story, doing a bit of public speaking, and then I became an advocate.
Over what period of time did it take you to become an advocate? And what were some of the things that you had to go through to become an advocate so that you could help make changes?
It took some time because I really had to get my head around mentally about what had happened and understand exactly what had happened. So I had, I think, at least 3 years full-time therapy. So I was doing a lot of therapy. I really threw myself into therapy to get to the other side. You know, when I first started therapy, it was like, yeah, I want to be on the other side. I'm tired of being here. I just want to get to there. So I was reading, I was doing everything that they told me that I needed to do, and I did it, meditating, really educating myself. And then I got to the stage where I felt really strong enough to be able to do it. And so 3 years, my therapist said, if you want to be an advocate within gender, you know, you need to, I can't be your counsellor anymore. And I said, and this is what I wanted to do. So I knew within myself that I was strong enough to do it.
Okay, so when you become an advocate, what sort of training do you have to do to become an advocate? Because it's a really important role to take on.
You have to have lived experience, so you really need to know your story. You have to be really genuine about it. We did a few days of media training or training, rehearsing our story. Being an advocate, I often do a lot of their, so if they talk about policy writing, I put my hand up, helping, just voicing and just saying, this is what I think, and they just take it on board.
Do they just take it on board? Do they literally take it on board, or do they look at it and say,
No, I actually have to say, when you're an advocate and you work for a really great organisation, and when I say work, it's all volunteer, they really listen and they really understand. So in the last policy, I spoke about how I would like court therapists to be held responsible for those who, or they need retraining if they don't get it right, because that's a really big decision that they make. And, you know, when you look at a court therapist, their whole agenda is to bring families together. And when I say together, I'm not saying husband and wife, I'm saying to have some relationship with children. I didn't have that. So again, she failed my children and she failed me. So, you know, she didn't really fulfill her role as far as I can see.
and you know, you when you say court therapists, it could be men and women, and they are there to support the family so that the family can come together and really it's all about the children. If there's children involved, it's really important that both parents are on the same page so that the children are not affected, but a lot of the time they're used as pawns.
They are used as pawns. And again, they should be trained enough to identify where people are being abused. They need to pick up on those red flags as well. She did not. And again, you know, is it better that an abused person has full custody and where there's limited access to the perpetrator? So, you know, it's not about having equal time with both parents. You've got to be really careful. There's a fine line there.
Yeah. So other sorts of advocacy that you work with, I see you're looking at policy, you're looking at court therapists and the way they go through the process of working with families, and it should be on equal terms, but you found it wasn't. What other things do you work with, and the group that you work with on policy, what other things do you look at?
We look at banking and how the banking institutes basically look at women and what they loan women. And again, you know, in most relationships, women aren't financially knowledgeable because they leave it up to the man. Again, had I gone to my bank and said, you know, I've left the marriage, maybe they could have helped me splitting up the finances or stopping certain bank accounts. Maybe that second credit card wouldn't have been had my name on it. All of these things come into play.
So let's talk a little bit about banks. What sort of control do they have over people's bank accounts? I mean, the government have bits of control over the bank accounts, but what can banks do to prevent abuse financially?
Financially, they can put a stop, literally, to having a joint account. So again, with that second credit card, I might have not had my name attached to that. So, I mean, it was a good outcome for me because I ended up getting all that money back. However, there's women out there that don't get that money back and they're still paying their ex-partner's debts.
But you took the time, the energy and the effort to find all the information so that you could get that money back. Whereas some women may not have the energy or the, what can I say here? They may be so emotionally involved, but their intelligence, and I've spoken to lawyers and they say, when you're highly emotional, your intelligence is low because you're not thinking clearly on what needs to be done. And that's not saying that you're not intelligent, but the emotional intelligence brings that intelligence down because you're so involved emotionally that you can't think straight.
That's correct. So you've really got to remove the emotion and, you know, it becomes a business. So, and that's how I looked at it. And there was a lot of times where I was really emotional, but it was interesting because the more I got into it and the more that I fought, the more that I was uncovering more and more things. So that really spurred me on because at the end of the day, it was a case that, no, this is not right. So it really came down to my values and what I basically was brought up on.
How many women would know to go to the bank and say, we're separated, can we do this? Not very many.
Not many. I didn't.
They're not educated to do that, are they?
No.
So how do you voice that as an advocate? Are there, you know, is there literature out there that can be handed out to women who have separated so that they can have a read and say, these are my rights, or men, I'm not just going to say women, or men, to look at their rights and say, okay, I need to do this and I need to do this and I need to whatever it may be, so that they can prevent themselves being left with debt or whatever it might be.
It's interesting because banks are starting to advertise about, are you being abused? We can help you. Are you financially being abused? Come and see us. So again, I think they're shifting that, where you go to the bank, and as a woman, when you go to the bank once upon a time and you said you had children, you couldn't get a loan. I think that whole mentality is starting to shift. So, and I mean, even when I went for my loan, I didn't say that I was paying child support because I was really scared that it would go against me and I wouldn't be able to buy the house that I've got. So I think that's all changing now, which is a good thing, because again, when we look at equality, men can have children, but yet it doesn't seem to go against them. Whereas women have children and it goes against them. It's like, I don't see the difference.
Well, there's no difference really. It's all the same, you know, it's equal, but it's not seen as equal. What other things in the advocate role have you done or you can see that need to be worked through so that there can be changes made? You know, the policies in government can be changed so it supports people who are, you know, on the street, or they've left a relationship, and abusive relationship, and they need help. What other sorts of policies are there that can be brought to the fore so that they can be dealt with?
I think there's many policies now. I mean, when we look at all the policies, there's the electricity companies getting on board with, and it's a strange one where people are being abused and held with high electricity bills and they're scared to leave the relationship. So again, that's all being looked at. Policies around reproductive abuse. That was an interesting element where people are forced to have terminations against their will, or condoms that have been ripped out and the woman falls pregnant. So all of those policies are really coming to light, and changes are being made. There's so much out there that it's like, wow, where do you start?
Where do you start, and how do you know, how many things do you deal with at once? And are the government there, and are they ready to make these changes? Do they want to make these changes? Are they interested in making the changes? Who do you go to? Who do you speak to start the ball rolling, to start something actually happening to make the changes? What is it? Because I don't, this is my personal opinion, and anyone can say what they like, but this is my personal opinion. I don't see the government as someone who wants to look at all the changes that need to be made so it supports people who have been abused, because there's so much abuse going on out there, and it's not just in relationships, it's, as you say, in all sorts of areas.
I think it has to start with education, and I think that's where they need to put their money. I also call it like a ping pong effect. You know, you go to one minister, you're passed on to another minister, you're passed on to another minister. So again, I think in the end, you just kind of go, it's not going anywhere.
And have you approached ministers, and what sort of, you know, comments or feedback have you received from them?
I get the general comment of, I'm really sorry for your abuse. However, contact this person, the ping pong effect. So, and then you contact that person and you don't hear anything. So, you know, they need to do action.
Yeah.
You know, it's not getting better. In fact, it's getting worse. You still hear about women getting or being murdered every
week.
Every week, yeah.
Every week. There's at least one in Australia. And that's kind of who we hear about and not the ones that we don't hear about. So yeah, and it's not just women, it's children. So yeah, that sort of thing has to stop. But how do you do that? You know, all the laws in the world won't stop that. If someone's so emotionally, I'll have to say, disturbed, that's the only result they can see to get heard.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty sad result if they do that, because they feel like they're not being heard.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
when we look at it, everyone needs to be educated. Judges need to be educated. Police need to be educated. You know, court therapists need to be educated. The government needs to be educated. They really need to sit back and listen to the people who've walked the shoes, and really understand it.
There's a lot of education, but I always say that the education needs to start in the schools from very early age about behaviour.
Oh, most definitely.
Behaviour is something that needs to start in the schools. Children need to be taught that if they see a certain behaviour that's, you know, frightens them or whatever, they can stand up and say, that's not right, you can't do that. Or they can talk to someone about it. They can tell somebody without feeling any fear. And it's all about education. It's about educating young girls who are in relationships, not in relationships, in families where there's abuse going on, kids where they see abuse going on, and they get older and they go into relationships that are abusive. Then they know no different because they've not seen anything different. So that education within the school system is a must.
Oh, totally agree.
Absolute must, that they should be educated. There should be a form of education, and it doesn't have to be around abuse. It just has to be, you know, talking about respect, talking about, you know, if they see something that they don't feel is right or is scary or whatever, they have the right to talk to someone, tell someone, or speak up and say, I don't like that. You're not, don't do that, you know, and not have a fear of being pushed down or pushed away or told to go to your room or whatever it might be. I don't know. But I feel that having these conversations, which I've had quite a few of, and not just with you, but other women and men, actually, I have. And it's really interesting, you know, the support that they need. But it is all around education, isn't it?
Most definitely. It's also too, you know, when you look at the adults, it's an adult standing up and saying, if someone is derogative to a woman, I don't find that acceptable. You know, you don't have to be nasty about it, but you can also say, this is unacceptable.
And if you know,
highlighting it.
yeah, if you know someone who is being abused and you know, and they're your friends and you know it, and you don't speak up, you're at fault as well.
Oh, most definitely. I've had many friends say, you know, they felt terrible when I was berated and put down. No one ever spoke up.
No, because they're too scared. They don't want to get involved.
Yeah.